I got my big toe completely cut off when I was 10 years of age. She gave us our dinner that particular day and then she disappeared. Oh, your mum's just had twins. I didn't know she was pregnant. Everybody loves their mum's cooking, don't they? But it's because you were in a safe space. Food is mood, and mood food is a big thing. Too often chefs get the credit, and appear, on the media and so on for what the heroes are, the food producers of Ireland. They just said they felt it was very authentic and it was somebody that was proud to be from that place, that was Donegal, and brought stories through the recipes of childhood right through to very practical recipes that people could relate to from the region.
Brian, a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you, Ryan. It's good to be here. I'm back in home turf as well.
Good.
Yeah.
It's I don't know you so well, but I've known you through the media, and I like the work that you do, and especially around Donegal, and I'd like to get to know you more. So I wanted to start with a question, and the question is, what is something that nobody knows about you, or I would say a lot of people don't know about you?
Whoa. Actually, I'll tell you a good one because it kind of relates to being back here in home turf and in the area of Bridgend and Burnfoot. I got my big toe completely cut off when I was 10 years of age. Completely off. So you wonder why or how could that happen to a 10-year-old? Well, it happened because I think in my mum's words, I was certainly mischief. Maybe that's not the word she used. She might have said I was a bad wee brat, to be quite honest, right? So my dad was a mechanic, which is funny coming back here today, and seeing your family, because I haven't seen them, your dad maybe in 20, 30 years. And of course, car breakers and what he does. My dad was always coming for parts. And I remember coming here with him as a child. And I went everywhere probably because I was just nosy and inquisitive. But this particular time, we called it a potato scutcher, which was for taking the tops off potatoes. And my dad was fixing it. But in true health and safety fashion of the 1980s, it was resting on a block, a 6-inch block. And I decided, while he was at the back working at it as a 10-year-old, to kick at the block. And I remember him distinctly a number of times saying to me, would you stop? Like, literally stop because it's going to fall.
Did you know that's what it could do?
I was on a mission to tip that block without knowing any consequences. All I could see. And I remember doing it. I remember kind of going like that, and that was my foot tapping off the block. But of course, it didn't happen for ages and ages. And then it did happen. And it just came down on my foot. And I wasn't in any pain. So then I started to shout to my dad, who came around, saw what had happened. But the minute he lifted, with the help of my uncle, the minute he lifted the piece of machinery up, then it was the release and the gush of the blood. And I passed out. And I remember Ryan, I don't know if you ever remember going through Manor Cunningham, leaving Bridgend on the way to Letterkenny Hospital. And Murray Motors, which was the old Opel garage. So I remember waking up and I remember just seeing what was obviously at some stage was a white towel, because I could see the edges of it were white, covered in blood, and my uncle holding me while my dad was frantically driving. And I just remember, I can still see it to this day, that yellow Opel sign passing Murray Motors. And of course, then at that stage, I conked back out again. But yeah, went to hospital and they restitched my whole toe back on. So I've actually never told anyone that story.
Really?
Yeah, not in the media. Yeah.
How come?
I don't know, actually. I suppose who wants to hear about, my big toe, and the fact that it got completely cut off. So it was 21 stitches on the outside, just if anybody's interested, to put it right back on the whole way around.
Oh, to put it back on?
Yeah.
They stitched it on?
Yeah, they got it back on in surgery that evening, yeah.
And working perfect?
Well, it's there. It might be an excuse for my terrible football and not featuring too much with Bert G.A. growing up.
Very good, hey. That must have been traumatic at that age too.
Well, it's interesting. I'm 49 now, and I think the first time I went to a proper maybe physiotherapist was last year for some issues I was getting in my hip.
Which side?
On the right, on the same side as the toe. And the guy was going through, look, any injuries? And he was doing some tests on me, and I said, no, like I've had a ACL on my knee, 3 times. And he goes, right, okay, anything on your foot? I said, no. And he's working away, and then he checks back in again 10 minutes later. He says, never no foot injuries. And I went, Jesus, yeah, got my big toe cut off. And he's like, so you just forgot to tell me that? Or he goes, because the signals he was seeing from what was going on in the hip were back in the toe. So that's the first time, like, since that happened, that I went, it's funny, because back then there was no physiotherapy. You're in hospital, you got out, you're on crutches, and you were turfed back to school. I mean, there was 12 of us in our family, so there was no time to be moping around, and you just got on with it and you forgot about it. So, there's no such thing as, was there trauma attached to that?
Yeah.
Probably, but was it dealt with? No. So it's mad just how things back then compared to if that was now, and the significance of maybe that happening now and somebody getting their toe cut off.
Yeah, I don't even know if the word trauma existed back then.
No, definitely not. Yeah, it was get up, get
Yeah.
out, and get on with it. Very much so.
And you said a family 12? It's a big house?
Yeah, so there's 12 in our house.
What was
Born
that like?
and reared in Bridgend. I actually have to say it was brilliant. We grew up in a 3-bedroomed council house, 14 of us, like including my mum and dad. So it was bunk beds everywhere. And we had a very good upbringing, like, no different to any large family in rural Ireland. We didn't have an awful lot, but what we did have was parents that looked after us. And my mum, she knew how to feed us. I think that's very important, because obviously she was, reared on a potato farm. And so we had access to potatoes and root vegetables, things that perhaps got forgotten for a while, like the turnip, and us in the field snedding them, or, harvesting and picking potatoes. That was just part of what you had to do to contribute and give your worth. But that upbringing for me, like, is that memory of my mum standing on the Stanley stove in a very small kitchen in a council house. And you have to remember that tables usually seat about 6 people. They're not like nowadays where people can extend them out and have the room in their kitchen. We couldn't extend it, because if you extended it anymore, you were into the cooker. But I remember, like, it was like there was nearly 2.5 sittings to get through everybody. And it was done on age, like whoever was the oldest sat at the first sitting. And it tended to be like the dinner was dished out. And it was, the stews, it was the one pots, the broths, like things that you're going, wow, that sounds lovely. And we're returning to. And that gave us a lot of vitamins that I didn't recognize that until, probably until I started being a chef. But like, women, and particularly the likes of my mother, were smart back then, because they made great flavors with very little. And, I've one really good memory, which was her standing at the Stanley stove, and that was turf, fired and heated. It wasn't oil, or it wasn't electricity. And she did have a 4-ring gas cooker then in later years. But I remember her giving us dinner one day, and it was Doherty's mince, like. If you remember that regionally around here, and if you're lucky, you got the special mince, and she was able to roll it into little balls and meatballs. And then she would always have added, frozen peas to it. And the potatoes would have went in, and lashings of gravy. So, I mean, it was somewhere between a stew and a soup. And I remember one of my daughters one time said, it sounds like a stoop, somewhere in between. But she gave us her dinner that particular day, and then she disappeared. And I distinctly remember going, where's she gone? And then I remember our neighbour, I think it was Marion Clark, came over a number of hours later and said, oh, your mum's just had twins. I remember going, I didn't even know she was pregnant. I didn't know she was pregnant. So I was that age where I just remember her cooking, and then getting us her dinner. Imagine that, like, about to have twins, feeding us, disappearing, going off, having twins, and literally being back at that stove in a couple of days' time, because, she knew that she was providing for us. There was no in between there, if that makes sense. It was straight back to the dinners. And I think the valid point that I'm making is, they did look after us nutritionally with those dinners. And, some of my brothers, like, we're all over 6 foot. And jokingly now, I'd say to my mum, like, did you not wash the fertilizer off the potatoes? Because we shot up like those potatoes in some ways. But yeah, definitely a brilliant memories of childhood growing up, yeah.
Do you think that's what influenced you towards the food scene, like?
Yeah, I do. I think it was a big impact for me, because again, everybody loves their mum's cooking, don't they? even to this day, like you'll return to it. But there's a number of reasons for that, Ryan, because when you go back and, if it's grandparents or parents' food that you're saying, oh my God, I remember, and everybody will argue their mum makes the best scone or the best stew. But it's because you were in a safe space, for most people, thankfully that was the situation. So you're relating back to that child that you were in a safe space, getting food which was warm and nourishing, and the role of food is that, first and foremost. It's to get our vitamins to stay alive and to function, so that food and that memory and that warmth in that, in many ways, definitely when I thought I want to go on and be a chef, it was really thinking on, my mum and what she did as a cook. But it wasn't exactly popular for a young male to be a chef, and to decide to go to catering college in rural Ireland then, in the late 80s, early 90s is when I headed off to do that. And, being from that background, that labour kind of intensive background, and my brothers and so on, I wasn't, physically doing enough work if I was going to be a chef. So it was kind of, I wouldn't say it was frowned upon, but it was certainly looked like going, where's he gone off? What's he gone off to do? Like he's going to be a chef.
Breaking the norm.
Certainly was then, because most people, that grew up around here in the Northwest would remember Fruit of the Loom, like massive employer. And, let's be honest about it, they went in, they recruited in schools. They went into schools, and a lot of people then at 14, 15 years of age, certainly, were starting to enter into that factory work. And I have a very vivid memory, of leaving the cottages in Bridgend and, as we say, walking down to Harry Leo's, which was where we got the bus. And that was, I was at secondary school then, and I was only there, I was an early school leaver, which I'll return to. But when I was going down to the bus, used to be there was all school buses, but it changed then in Reddens, and Danny McBurty. They were leaving with bus loads of people that had left school, and they were going to work in Fruit of the Loom, which was much needed money in some sense there for an awful lot of families. But there was something in my head when I seen those buses, and I remember thinking, God, no one seems to be looking very happy. Something registered with me. Everyone kind of didn't look that happy to be going off to work in a factory. Now, they may have been, but that was just my kind of summary of it, and it stuck with me at that time. And it's not that there was a stubbornness in me or a thranness, but it's nearly like there was a decision made where I went, I'm not so sure. Maybe, yeah, I want the money, but I'm not so sure that's where I want to go. So I ended up, in secondary school, staying there into my second year in Scoilwara in Buncrana with the nuns, and some of them actually ended up shaping me as well in terms of becoming a chef, because the mischief came back in again at secondary school for me. And boys will be boys, like at that age. And so I owned up to something that we got caught. And my I suppose my punishment then...
What was it?
You're pushing me today, aren't you?
I'm curious.
Well, I'll tell you what it was actually, and then I'll tell you the punishment. If anybody remembers the second floor, actually, ironically enough, where home economics was, and it had a glass window on the corridor. So we used to hang there at the top of those steps. Do you know it? Did you go to that school?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, so the top of those steps, and so there's a bit of a dare going on, and it was, if you could open one of those windows was a shutter. So, big deal, we got it open. So that wasn't enough. It was, could we get in? And so, of course, legs 6'4", in I went. What does your mate do? Close the window. So you're left, and then it became a kind of bit of the dares, got a bit braver. So I'm not proud of this one, but what I did do, and the only thing like culinary wise or cooking wise I knew to do, was I found jelly, and for some reason I melted it in the microwave, and I don't know to this day what the intention was, or was it just looking for an audience and a reaction to the dare. I don't fully kind of remember all of that, but I do remember them saying, like, everybody scrambling and me going, I'm going to get caught. So what I did was I, for some strange reason, opened a drawer and put the jelly into the drawer. But what I didn't realise, jelly obviously sets then when it sits for a while, but it dripped from drawer 1 to drawer 2 to drawer 3. And in the lockable drawer at the bottom was the exams for home economics.
Oh, Jesus.
So it became quite a big deal that somebody needed to own up. And of course, all fingers were pointing to who it was, which was myself. So I did own up, and it seems like mad that that's what I did, but that's as mad as it got for me, if that makes sense, in the mischief side of it. But my punishment was to be down early every morning at the convent at 7 o'clock. So not the school, but over in the convent with Sister Enda and the nuns. And one of the jobs, one of the many jobs I had to do was setting the altar, but also making scones and setting them up and doing a little bit of the cream and the jam. And to this day, I actually think I referenced it in my book, but to this day, I'll always remember that because it did teach me how to make scones, how to shape them, how to serve them when they were cooled, put them on the bun rack. Like basic little skills, but in some ways, it's like the good that came out of what I thought was the bad and the worst thing in the world at that particular time.
Yeah.
No, it still is. And I certainly, if any of my own daughters did it, I'd be putting them on a week's punishment myself.
But tell me this, did they believe you when you told them that it was an accident, that that's not what you meant?
I think I'd have been pushing it if I said it was an accident.
But you didn't mean to go towards exams?
Absolutely not.
But did they believe that?
I had no notion the exam papers were
I know.
there. But, you know, I suppose we all understood that melting jelly would reset.
Yeah.
But to this day, the purpose of why I was melting jelly, I have no idea where this was going. You know, I certainly wasn't going to be trying to create something new in terms of cookery or culinary.
And is that part of your menu today?
No, but every time I look at it again, it's funny. Your memory goes back, and you have a wee kind of chuckle to yourself. But that's out there now, so you've got it out there today. Because I've never actually told the story as to the punishment that I received that kind of shaped a little bit between my mum and the nuns, and that was kind of the entry point into a little bit of a notion about cooking and baking and so on. And then, you know, more importantly, in Bridgend, you know, I worked for Harry Leo, you know, who was an amazing man. He was so good to me throughout my whole career, like, and that family in general, because I worked in the back of the chip shop, you know, and I was there with Terence Porter, and he was pre-battering fish, and we were eyeing potatoes, and like that, you know, that was the go-to place, you know, throughout that kind of decade, and continues to be, continues to be. And again, I think without Harry Leo, without the chip shop, I don't think I would have went on to be a chef, because I think it was in 1991, they built Harry's restaurant then, just up the road. Yeah. And then I was also doing the potatoes for there, peeling them down at the chip shop. We were taking them up. Harry was in the little van. You know, I'd jump in with him. So you're up and down with potatoes. And then that was my first time in a professional kitchen where I saw chefs in uniforms. Mm-hmm. And I thought to myself, wow, this is class. Like there was definitely an energy there that I thought, this is really amazing. And it's energy that you could relate to maybe your best moments on a football field. It you know, and that sounds a weird sort of combination, but you know, when you've played your best or you've been your fittest and you just feel that energy, that's kind of how a kitchen, and it's kind of how a performance is in there. And I could sense something back then that I thought, God, I'm liking this. And between the conversations, then I got up into kitchen porter. I actually worked with my mum, washing dishes in Harry's restaurant then in 91, 92. And then with their support, you know, I had left school in the end of second year in secondary school. So technically I still was an early school leaver. But in less than a year, I was returned to education and straight to college. So it kind of speeded it up.
You would have been one of a few then that went to college, I assume, back then. Not many went to college.
Probably not, because of the Fruit of the Loom impact that was there. But I mean, they were making money and I didn't have much money. And then, you know, going off to college, you know, I went when I was 16. I was one of the youngest to start Killybegs Catering College, and to get in there because I had been an early school leaver. Back then, not like now, you know, there was waiting lists. There was hundreds of people applying to become a chef. So you did go through quite a rigorous process and an interview. And it was the interview that got me over, because I talked about, you know, the fact that academic-wise in secondary school, I liked elements of it, and that interview took out the process for me that seemed to be the practical and the creativity side that I liked, and that was, you know, unannounced to me, that was the answers they wanted to hear for the creativity side of becoming a chef, and that was me at 16, you know, less than a year after leaving secondary school, and I suppose in some ways avoiding working in Fruit of the Loom, straight into catering college.
What was it like moving away from the area then? Because I assume you moved to Killybegs, you had lived in there. Would have been a lot to travel.
Yeah, we did. We lived up from a Sunday through to Friday evening, and then I came back at the weekends and worked in Harry's for a period of time. And for us, then, it's interesting for me because people, they say, "Oh, you're from Moville, aren't you?" But I'm from Bridgend, and our family moved. We got a bigger council house then built for us in Burt, and our family moved up to Burt, but I never actually stayed in Burt. I had a room. My brothers and sisters will slag me. Yeah, you're the spoilt one. You got a room, but I rarely used it. It was only those first couple of months of coming back from college, and working in Harry. So it was really sleeping there Friday, Saturday night, and only for a number of months. So, for me, I didn't grow up in Burt. I actually grew up in Bridgend, and from a distance, that's seen as the same place. But when you're in there,
Yeah.
like it's different. It's Burt and it's Bridgend, and yes, it's the same parish. So yeah, I was Bridgend through and through in terms of my upbringing.
What did whenever you went to college and you started doing the work around becoming a chef, like how did your world change? Like how did you see yourself then? Was there a version that you seen?
Not initially. I think it was the skills. What struck me was the amount of attention to detail and skills from peeling to chopping, the basics of what you learned, and then the cooking techniques. To put it simply, the sauteing. What is sauteing? The frying. What is frying? Deep frying, grilling. Baking. They're all cooking terms that needed an awful lot of knowledge around them, but also to get a product to apply those cooking terms. In other words, that was the recipe generation. You don't go and you learn recipes off by heart. You learn the classical recipes, but it was the amount of skills, knowledge and information that could be got that really intrigued me, because even to this day, it's a continuous learning process when it comes to food. It comes to an ingredient, it comes to the person making it, it comes to their story, their background. So that struck me as, God, I'm really getting into something that I don't really know an awful lot about yet, but there's so much more to learn. But the catering college, Killybegs, back then was amazing. Like it still is brilliant today, but back then there was something very different. And chefs that went there in the 80s and 90s were very employable by restaurants all over Europe. It was seen as the go-to college to get chefs. And that is because, like, when we were there was compulsory study. We had to be in at 7 a.m. We got our breakfast there in the morning. And as chefs, like, you had your duty and role. You were part of making that breakfast. And it was very strict practical classes and theory. And then in the evenings, we had compulsory study, where we had to come back in at 7 to 10. Like, it was 3 hours of study. And that's what got you down to the cuts of an animal. Like, you had to learn them off by heart, and the continuation of exams. That back then is what shaped me in terms of a chef, and I started to feel knowledgeable, and I was hungry for that. And then I suppose you could start to see, where am I going next after this? Where am I going to work, and where do I want to go? Because these are very, very global, transferable skills that have a language, and that language is your hands and the practicality that you add to those ingredients. To me, that I think it's one of the best life skills anybody can have, is how to cook. And then when you do it professionally, I've always enjoyed it. Like, honestly, it's, to me, sometimes not a job. It's just, there's a love there for it. But I never had massive ambitions to say I'm going to go on and do certain elements of what I do now. That kind of came, I think, afterwards, when you were in an industry for a while.
And when you finished your college degree with Killybegs, what did you do after then?
We had a placement that we had to do, and so I was placed in Greencastle, in Keely's Seafood Restaurant, which was a brilliant restaurant. Back then, it was just exceptionally good, and James Keely, the chef, the proprietor, was just French trained as well. Ex-Killybegs, had gone to Germany. So there was a lot there, and a lot of people wanted it, but I thought, if I get this, I'm really going to learn that side of it, and I did. And to this day, still apply, still think about him. And, he became a bit of a mentor for me. He passed away very young, but you don't forget things like that. You don't forget the people who helped you along the journey and along the career. And it's where I met Brenda, my wife, because she worked there. So I kind of stayed in that area, hence living in Moville now. And that was back in 1993. So I'm longer in Moville than I am living in Bridgend, if that makes sense.
Yes. Um, with you moving to Moville, and then you're also in the media, so like I always find it very unusual to see someone from Donegal in the media, because I always feel like, because we're so far away, we're out of the way. But how did you bring yourself to put yourself forward to that, or just be, have a voice from this area?
I think you're right. There's a long time where, anybody in Donegal, it was like we were so far away, and we've got this kind of situation where we're uniquely clinging on to the border of Northern Ireland. And I suppose parts of the Republic of Ireland, and particularly back then, we were still kind of the unknown Donegal, and people from Donegal. So I think, again, if you were going to break out to do anything, I think you had to work harder at it, if that makes sense in some ways. So when it comes to, what I do now in the media, which I absolutely love, like I love radio. I love it. I think it's one of the best platforms. And, I've got this thing where, to me, radio should remain audio and radio, where nowadays it's no different to what we're doing. It's all about the visual as well. But I think speaking, the power, the voice, like I could listen to radio, and I do listen to it quite a bit. To me, it's very powerful when somebody's on there, whether they're ranting, might have been the old Sean Doherty show that was in Highland Radio, or they're on with Claire Byrne, or they're on BBC Radio 4. There's everything from a rant to a genuine story and a journey, and the tone changes. It's like me now, like the tone will change again, and I think that's something you only get from radio. But I never certainly sat down to be in the media. I think it kind of happened for me by accident, and I think I'm very lucky in that there seemed to be, not in my words, but there seemed to be a medium voice there that could work in the Dublin media, but could also lend itself to the experience of, Northern Ireland. And, I'm 15 years, actually just over 15 years now, as being the resident chef on BBC Radio Foyle on a Wednesday afternoon. And, making cooking work in the radio, I didn't have a clue how to do that. But we've made it work in some ways, and it features quite a bit, nothing to do with me, but it features quite a bit now on radio in general. And then for the last number of years, I'm very, very privileged to be like on the Claire Byrne show on RT Radio 1. And again, that's you going there with your stories, it's going there with your food, your journey. And it's a platform, the way I see it is it's a platform to educate people, remind them, reset them about food, the importance. And, anybody listening to this, don't forget the role of food. Why do we eat? We eat to get our vitamins to stay alive and to function. That's the key, primarily, the reason why we eat. Now, me and you might go out.
Just say it again. We eat because...
We eat to get our vitamins to stay alive and to function. I really believe in that sentence, and for me, that's how I see food. And the impact on you, look, having a breakfast, why do we need it? Why do we skip it days? There's an awful lot dictated by our mood, and food can reset, it can resettle all of us. And, we could decide we're going out tonight. That's a social eat, or we might have a confirmation or first communion. That's occasions, but we still do need to eat, and it's fueling our body, and everybody's got a decision to make as to how they want to fuel their body, depending on the stage of life they're at, the physicality of what they're doing, if they're training their football, if they're older. That is the role of a chef that gets overlooked, because, again, we all need to know, look at somebody. I think what woke me up to that was my own two girls, and realising as they're growing up, there's foods that they like, and the softness of what they need to be eaten, at certain ages and so on. And I mean that not as a professional chef, but I mean it just as a dad. They don't come with a manual, like they create one, and it's your job to still make sure, like what my mum did, that you're feeding your family, and you're making sure you're getting the best for them. And food is fuel. To me, it is the single best thing that you can put in your body. Yet, how many times do we spend so much in chemists, running to doctors, where really we need to go back a couple of stages and start to look at what you're going to put into our bodies today, tomorrow, and those small little steps that starts to get us eating better for ourselves. And it doesn't have to be expensive food. We're talking here about going back to, whole foods that aren't ultra processed in many, many ways.
I went through a change a few years ago. I went to a retreat in South America, in Peru, and it was 40 days. and it was like a strict diet, 2 meals per day, no meat. So it was all veg, no salt, no spices, nothing like that, just water. Porridge in the morning, and porridge one morning, then rice, maybe with an egg, and then just veg for lunch. It was like a psychedelic retreat that I went with ayahuasca, but that was also part of the diet. But one of the biggest lessons that I learned in that time was my relationship with food. Because I only had 2 meals per day, wasn't eating a lot, I was losing a lot of weight. It really taught me how to be mindful about eating. So like normally I'm just like get in as quick as I can, but because it was all I had, it was the most exciting part of the day. I would have took my time eating that food and just really enjoying it, and I really felt like I was nourishing my body, and I felt like I was understanding my body in a way that I hadn't before. Whereas when I think about it, I felt like I just abused my body in terms of just not really caring about what I eat most of the time, you know. And it's just my relationship with food, and I was like, holy shit, fuck, I haven't really been taking care of my body properly. Like I have been eating shit food for too long, you know. And it was interesting, you know. And ever since that, it's like my relationship with food has changed, you know.
Yeah, and I think, Ryan, you know, don't be sore on yourself or anybody for the past and say, "Jeez, like I used to all these takeaways and that's how I live." We're human, you know. Do I have a takeaway? Of course I do. And if I go in to collect it, like sometimes locally, guys, God, I didn't expect you to be in here. I'm like, well, like we're human, so we will, and we are addicted to that kind of. I won't say fatty foods, but we're addicted to those taste buds that make food work and the trickery of it. That has that return factor to us and go, God, that was a really good Chinese, or you know, it was a really good Indian. So what I always say to people is, it's no different to life in general. Take stock of where you are right now and make simple little changes, and you know, it's to look after yourself for the future. And I suppose the wake up call I got, and I've spoken about this quite publicly, is, you know, in 33, like I have, you know, heart disease for a young man, that, and hypertension in my early 30s, totally medicated on it now. But there was a period of time there where that was very, very tough on health for me. But the upside to that is that I had the skills to be able to actually fuel a lot of the rehab that was required and needed, and muscle damage that was done to me and things like that. So it's still there, and you know, it's now about keeping the risk factors down, and the best way to do that for me is lifestyle, more importantly. So the encouragement I would give you and give others listening is, you know, what do you want? You know, what are you setting out to achieve? Is it a calmer mind? If so, then there is mindful aspects that we can add into our food. And that is, you know, a very quick example I'll say to that is, I often say to people, how many colours was on your plate last night? And people are like, Jesus, I haven't a clue. But you'll know tonight, because you're going to go and you're going to go, okay, I've got green, I've got, you know, a little bit of red meat there, it's a bit caramelized and brown. But just taking note of those colours is mindful eating. And then say to yourself, you know, what are the textures? You know, if the veg is boiled versus the potato being roasted versus the steak being caramelized or, you know, barbecued, or maybe it's a slow cook, well, then there's textural. And then after that, you start to enjoy and pick up the flavors, because understanding flavors is very important to enjoying food. And if you can get to the stage where just that change of the colors and mindful eating slows you down, and slowing that down in how we consume it, it's just better for your body overall. And the other big thing I'd say to people is just take a look at your portion size, because we do overeat. There's no doubt about it. Your body does not need the big dinners that I suppose we were reared on and glad to get back then. But that was 3 meals a day back then. It's no longer that. We're now consuming 5 a day. Think about it like brunch. We love, we'll go out 10 o'clock on a Saturday morning. You know, that first breakfast we had doesn't seem to be enough anymore. We're not happy with that. So we might get access to a scone, coffee in our hand. Most of the time we have snacks in our hand, like whether it's from a water to peanuts to fruit, again, depending upon your choice. But we seem to think we need more food, and I'm not so sure we do. I would just say that to people is, look at your portion sizes, you know, be mindful, look at the colours, look at the textures, and then see how you're going to enjoy that food. And we'll talk in a while maybe about developing flavours and the importance of that, because cooking techniques can develop flavours. And those are simple little changes that you or I can make. And for me, I need to remind myself of that, all the time. And I'm not going to be reappearing for Bert and hurling or Gaelic.
Why not?
And I know that for my age, but I also know, that I want to be fit and well. I want to be the best version of myself that I can be, and we all can be. And I think central to that is the food, the store cupboard ingredients, and also that life skill we touched upon, which is cooking. And everyone can cook, Ryan. I'm sure you can.
I would say I can cook because it's edible, but in terms of like being a skilled cook, I would say I'm all right. I'm okay. I don't value it enough. I value food I look at food as fuel. So when I eat, I want to eat a nutritious meal that's going to give me the best for my body. You know, so like I like to train, I like to work out. So I'm always thinking, okay, is this going to help me? Am I getting enough protein, carbs, and fats as well? So that's kind of how I look at food. So I'll make because I to be busy, so I kind of structure myself in a way that the food is kind of already prepped, that I can just buy it from a butcher's and stick it in the oven. It's ready in 15 minutes. And then 15 minutes, I can be doing a few other tasks. So I kind of don't, I know I say I'm not losing time, but I'm also not saying that that's the best way, but that's what works for me right now, and yeah.
Yeah, and I'm not picking on you here for a second, but I'm not accepting that. Like I'm gonna accept that as a fairly weak excuse for you saying you're too busy. So you're too busy to increase longevity in your life, because that is what food and food choices is going to do for you. And I could be raw here. I do a lot of business coaching with people, one-to-one, and I would, if this was a session right now, I would say to you, well, give me your screen time for the last week. And what would it be? 2 hours, 3 hours, whatever?
It'd be a lot more.
Yeah, a lot more. So what are you busy doing then? Versus cutting down a little bit of that, whether it's social media or it's watching endless reels on TikTok. Take a bit of that time out and apply that just to your weekly. Even you said you're doing a bit of batch cooking, which sounds like you are in a way, but you're getting a lot of the work done for you, the trust in butchers, the trust in added value. And it's understanding at what point of that added value is it highly processed, somewhat processed versus whole foods. So that would be my kind of session back to you today is, no, Ryan, I'm not taking that. By next week, I want you to cut down a little bit of that other time that you perceive to be making you busy and spend it on a bit of meal planning, and it's not like, oh, I'm not writing down every meal. No. Just do your shopping as a meal planning, because, a quick example I'll say to people is, when's the last time you roasted a chicken? And if you haven't, try it this week. And you know what? Roast two, because the same energy of the oven is going to roast two. And keep that for your sandwiches, for your wraps, for whatever it is for the next 3 days. That cold chicken that you've now put this beautiful roasted flavour, because, a question is, what is the flavour of chicken? And people go, I don't know, it's just chicken. But roasted chicken is amazing, isn't it? And all that has changed is heat as an application. And that is what cooking is about. It's applying heat to really good quality ingredients that you kind of care about in the choice of where you get them, and what they are, but what they're contributing to you as well. So I also don't accept that, there's a lot of talk at the minute about ingredients being very expensive. Yes, food has gone up, and some of it needed to go up. Chicken's is the greatest example. Again, how we might complain, God, I used to get a chicken for $3.99, $4.99. It's not possible to properly rear an animal, for that type of money. So you've got to question, what is that process versus the old chicken that we used to love and the flavour? And that might be making a choice, like, for example, here in Inishowen, Noon's Chicken in Clonmany, the choice of going to them, which is a slow reared. So they're spending another, 8 to 10 days allowing the chickens to have whatever water they want, feed what they want, when they want it, rather than this kind of any forced times of when and what they need to eat. And as a result, we're getting a better chicken. And let's be honest, a chicken reared in the hills of Donegal. There's something nice about that, isn't there? And your choice. And back to that second chicken in the oven, just simple little steps like that will make your time a bit wiser. And I don't think you're going to be spending as much in the chemist in 5 years, 10 years time.
Hopefully not. Well, I'll continue to talk about that. So a while back, I used to do all my prep on a Saturday, and I'd cook for maybe 5 hours on a Saturday. But I found it a huge task, because it just became, I was like, no, I can't do this every single weekend. That's 5 hours out of my weekend that I kind of want to just, time to spend something else. So then that's why I resorted to the butcher. So the meat's raw, it's flavored. The potatoes are uncooked, they're just flavored, and the vegetable is already cut up. So all them little things to me of buying the raw meat, flavoring the potatoes, cutting the veg, because I don't enjoy it. But the one thing I do enjoy is I do enjoy cooking breakfast.
Yeah.
I don't know why, but like I'm happy to make eggs or, bacon and toast or omelette or whatever, I enjoy that. That's the only meal. But when it comes to dinners, I just don't think I've ever felt like I've succeeded in
I think you want a quick fix, and you're enjoying the quick fix with the breakfast, because there's a process there from the cooking to eating it within a period of time that's maybe only 10 minutes, 15 minutes. And that seems to be suiting you.
Yeah.
That's what I'm hearing.
Yeah, that's true.
And so you'll do that. So you'll say, oh, I can't cook, but you've just proved you can cook. I don't enjoy it, but I'm okay at making breakfasts. And that you are everybody else, because this is what I hear, and I hear it constantly. Like, I don't have time to cook. I don't know what I'm cooking. People are driving home going, what the hell am I going to have for dinner tonight? And who's there? Who's not there? We need to settle. We need to calm. And we need to really understand that cooking at home is one of the best skills that any of us can have, and to provide for ourselves and other. You need to turn that occasion into an occasion. Think about it that way. It's cooking. It's not a chore. And slow yourself down, because you have to enjoy those experiences. And also, again, be mindful of the chopping, the sounds, the techniques. Get that into it. I think it's fantastic therapy. I'm not going to lie. I think just, I could be left on my own in the kitchen home for hours and hours. And, I think I'm in there 20, 25 minutes, and it could be 2 hours. Now, they're not waiting 2 hours in the dinner, but I could have gone off and started to do other things. And I think that is just a mindset shift and change that people need to, including you, consider doing.
I agree. I think what came up for me, it's the time.
Yep.
I don't like to give a lot of time to it.
No.
That's what it's back to me.
But it's going to give you a lot more. You need to understand that. What are the results? The results are your health, your well-being, the lifting of your mood, the heat from a cup of tea, feeling better. Now, many's a situation was calmed and sorted at the table with a cup of tea, and then you're up to a bowl of soup and you're getting the nourishment. It's that warmth. It's just that senses are all, they're not that they're tricked. The smell and the taste just takes you places that, to me, nothing else can do. So it is totally de-stressing when it comes to food, and to think about it that way. And again, just a reminder what it's doing for you, longevity, long term, and in the short term of lifting your mood. Food is mood, and mood food is a big thing.
Yeah. Thank you, Brian. I will take that on board. You mentioned Nuns, is it?
Yeah.
Do you work with them, or?
So a lot of the work I'm doing at the minute, Ryan, is I do a lot of new product development, and it's with a lot of Irish food producers, and it's really taking where they are and transitioning them over and into retail. So we do a lot of it with Dunnes Stores, and for the Simply Better brand, which is the upper tier brand in Dunnes Stores. And it's interesting to point it out, because I think supermarkets get a lot of flack, and it's wrong. Particularly now at the moment, it's like, God, the cost of ingredients. But what the role of the supermarket is to provide a very safe space to sell food. And within that, there needs to be producers, and there's an awful lot of families around Ireland who are producing from family farms that they've inherited. And for some of them, my work is can we add value to that it's not just a one-dimensional farm that's producing a product, and just using Nuns here in Inishowen and in Donegal for an example, that is, I think it's a second or third generation family there now that are rearing chickens literally at the foot of the Cluncha Hills, between Clonmany and Carndonagh. And there's an ease to the air, and, good food gets produced by good people, and a sense of place. And I think in Donegal, we're modest, we're timid in some ways, and we don't shout and roar, about the positive food that we're producing. And yet, you'll come back from Spain, you'll come back from France, and you'll say, they do it so well over there. Why can't we get it? We can get it. I don't think we're looking for it as much. So that's why I love the role that I do, because it's not just are they adding value in their chicken, in lots of farms, lots of other companies that I work with, but they're bringing that product to the marketplace, and you're telling the story of the product and the people and the family, and the impact that has on that family, because that is, sustaining their farm, their business. They're starting to employ people. And, I'm working with over 100 Irish producers, and the story is the same throughout. anytime you can empower or give people something that is your knowledge back to them to help them advance and create more jobs, more financial security in those sectors that we cannot let die off from the Irish farming and in those craft skills that they have, whether it's in butchery, cheese making, whatever it is, we need to keep them alive. And as long as I have a voice to do that, and I'm allowed to do it in the role that I'm doing at the minute with Dun Stores, I will continue to do it because, they're the people takes the risk, food producers, fishermen leaving their family for a week, up early in the morning, every single farm in Ireland, from milking that's gone on to produce our cheese and, the fancy coffees that people are enjoying. Think about it, that milk has to come from somewhere. It has to be milk and the welfare of the animals. And I think the risk that families and farms and Irish food producers are taking and doing in very challenging times over the last 5 years, they deserve every cent that is going to them in an increase, and they need it. And I think that's the value of, there will be no more cheaper food as we remember it to be. This is where food prices are now and are starting to be deserving of the work that's gone into them. And, too often chefs get the credit, and appear, on the media and so on for what? Applying heat to quality ingredients. The heroes are the food producers of Ireland.
And you're doing a lot of working with the producers then?
Yeah.
Donegal only?
No, it's national. But obviously, you'll have a fondness for what happens in your own county and happens in Donegal. And, we have bread being made here in Donegal that's going to every Dun Stores in Ireland.
Is this like the Simply Better brand?
Yeah.
Or across their different ranges?
So it's interesting on that brand because, again, I think supermarkets and supermarket food, there's a lot of perception out there, but in the Simply Better brand, there's no artificial colourings, flavourings and preserves. That's a valuable statement.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, it's a very valuable statement.
And I don't shop in supermarkets, I'll tell you why. I suppose I just don't know what I'm getting.
It's like, I love to give a couple examples, and there's one on the bread, but across the brand in general, the fact you are not getting any artificial colourings, flavourings and preserves, and we're trying to keep the craft skills associated, the handmade of the bread. Like, you can almost see that baker's handprint when he turns that into the tin. There's another project like not too far away from here in Strabane where, there's a range of jarred sauces being made, and that's a funny one because people go, Jesus, you wouldn't use a jarred sauce, Brian, would you? And you're like, yeah, I would. And then when you explain to them like that this is like an authentic Indian range, to give an example of this, and again, there's nothing in there, only true ingredients, and they've an old authentic process where they sweat the onions, they add the spices, and they develop the paste over hours, and then it's yielded up with fresh tomatoes. And then what keeps the shelf life on it, because people are going, but if I made that, the house is gone in 5 days, why is there 6 months in that? And it's to do with how they hot fill it to sterilise, and then the steam injection and the pressure and the cap seal. You're taking away the air, and when you take away air, when you take away time, warmth, oxygen, food and moisture, when you take any one element of them away, then food lasts longer. So you're taking away the oxygen in the jar. But there is a better sauce than I could make at home over the next 2 hours of adding those spices at the right ratio, developing that base flavour, and nothing in there to preserve, extend shelf life and that in the Simply Better range. And it's a great example of something else that perceptionally needs to be changed when it comes to supermarket mindset of the consumer, but also recognition of this is another fairly local company that is making and is basically producing this way. And I think, Ryan, to go back to, not to get too heavy technically, but you take, something simple as a fresh apple, you put it on the table, you put a tin of apples on the table, you put frozen apples on the table, or you put dried apples, which are all available and out there. So the role of the supermarket is to give the shelf. You can pick up and decide, which apple am I actually going and wanting today and what's its use? If you left them 4 on the table, which one's going to go off first? The fresh apple. So why would the dried one not going to go off? Because, again, it's when you remove either time, warmth, oxygen, food, or the moisture. So in the dried, the moisture's been removed. In the tin, the oxygen's been removed. So they're natural ways of preserving food to allow us to have different aspects of that in terms of how we use them, when we use them, and to extend their season in a lot of ways as well, because, the Irish apple can only be harvested and kept for so many months of the year. The Irish tomato's in season right now, and again, you come back from your holidays, oh, the Spanish tomato is amazing. Irish tomatoes are amazing for that 8-10 week that they're in season. So it's knowing when they're in season. But don't go into the supermarket with this distrust going, oh, is it really from Ireland now? Yes, it is, because legally they have to say that. And turn around. What I love about the Simply Better is they tell the story of the producer. They tell who's growing the tomatoes. So there's a link there to that producer. And as a chef, like I'm actually very, very proud, and it's along with Nevin Maguire, both of us, that we're associated with that brand, because it is a very clean label, very clean brand. And when that food comes through that development process from those farms, from those producers and those families, and their stories told, it's a very proud moment for those families, because, you know, it's the difference in adding value, keeping their farm, keeping their family together, keeping a young person on the farm with a job that might have been thinking of heading off to Australia. That's the bit of the job that I absolutely love, when they see that pallet load going out and it on the shelves nationally. Then it's proud for them, but also for us.
Is it easy for someone to start? You know, if someone has some kind of dish that they like making, whatever it is, for them to become that supplier for Dunn Stores and get their product on the shelves?
It's not easy. That's the first thing I would say. And, you know, I think it was about 15 years ago, maybe less actually. There was a lot of ideas, you know, and whether it is the local EO office and the enterprise board, you know, there's a lot of support there. Start your own food business, start your own food program. But back to an earlier point, I suppose, you know, you might come to me and say, you know, this is my granny's recipe for, you know, gooseberry jam, and they were growing there in Inch Island, like on the hedgerows, and we foraged them, and it's a great story. And I suppose there's a bit of me siphon through to go, well, Ryan, my granny's jam was better than your granny's jam. And it's not to take away or disrespect that journey, that story, and what you're bringing across in terms of the uniqueness. But I would always say to somebody, if you were pitching that idea to me now, I would say, do me a favour, go into a retail supermarket and just take the aisle where all the jams are, and I come back to me and tell me where the price point is, starts for jam, where it ends for jam. Look at the jars, look at how it's, you know, the perception of what it's presented in, look at colours, and come back to me and tell me what you like and where you want to be within that, because that's a really good, we call that benchmarking, but it's going out and looking at the marketplace very quickly just to see, okay, where do I see this fitting in, and do I have enough of a uniqueness and a point of difference? And that's a good way to scan an idea very, very early, you know, to see if it's something you want to pursue and bring forward. And then after that, there's many's a challenge after that, which is, where are you going to make it, Ryan? Well, I'm making it in my mum's kitchen at the minute, and that is fine for an everyday market and going and selling it, you know, at a small local level. But how are you going to upscale that? You know, I can get you a meeting with Dunn's, Ryan, but you can't really produce any more than 50 jars a week at the minute, so that's not going to be any good to us. So there's that journey, that story, that upscaling. So there needs to be a lot of support to the individuals, and that tends to be a lot of what I did. And as a result of that, we actually set up a food development centre at the Northwest Regional College in Derry, because I was presenting the bottlenecks that people like you with ideas were having, and it was that skills gap where they didn't have the technical knowledge to know how to upscale. How much shelf life do I put in this product? Do I put 6 months, 12 months? That's a rigorous process the product has got to go through. The recipe's got to standardise, as in it's the same every time. The yields you need to understand. You're like, what's that? You know, understand when you cook, where's the moisture loss? What yield are you left with? You know, because you might start with a 50 kilo batch. That's not 50 kilos of jam, using jam as the example. You know, it could end up being 40, and you're like, God, I didn't get as much out of that as I thought. So it's understanding all of that process. And that centre went ahead. I did it as a consultant for a number of years, and it's still there and still flourishing. And I send a lot of people who I have chats with at this early stage to them. And it's really to map out, have you got an idea, or is it just a wee hobby and a notion, Ryan, that you've got? And then, of course, away from that, like, there is people that are more established and are starting to get out onto the market. They've progressed from the local farmers, you know, market to a couple of shops, and they want to go forward. And again, you know, part of the role is to really take a sound beat of where they are right now and what their capabilities are, and do they have their own food premises that is specific just for producing that product? Is it of a standard, you know, that is legally compliant? That's important. Have they the energy and the capacity here to grow up and be able to supply a retailer, because that then becomes a very different animal. And sometimes a lot of them will have the energy, the passion and all of that. And it's a case of, right, they don't have the right premises now, but you'll leave them with that advice as to what they need, at the next phase. And also you'll signpost them to where maybe there's funding available for that. And that's the side of the job I love. So you asked the question, was it easy? No, absolutely not. And what I'll give you is what I'm giving you a bit of here today, the raw truth in the journey for you to decide. You've started to explore it, but for you to decide, do I actually want to do this or do I not? And if I do want to do it, what is involved? And that has cost you nothing at this early stage other than a conversation and some space in your mind to start to take note and go, I want to do this, I want to upscale or otherwise. So, again, without repeating, is it a hobby? Is it a business? Because at that hobby stage, we're probably just coming out of the whole cupcake phenomenon, aren't we? Where everybody was doing cupcakes, and I probably had in the region of 40, 50 people contacting me going, my daughter's just started baking, she loves baking, cupcake. But when you get to the bottom of the story, she may just love baking because she's had a difficult time in her life, and there's back to that therapeutic stage of how it's helped him or her, and that is totally something that should be nourished and continued. But and who's your customers? Well, it's all family at the minute. Family are really good when they're getting testing and free and samples, and they rarely become your customer when you go into business then.
Yeah.
I think particularly in food, and that's that difficult stage of transitioning over and out from that. And food goes through trends, so jam's always stayed. It's a good example to give you. The cupcake thing is kind of going away a little bit, and I always remember my mum saying, like, but the cupcakes they're just those wee butterfly buns we used to make years ago. She's right, because it's that Madeira mix, and it's just now we started to heighten them up and add a different visualization on them, and some people have gone on to run very, very successful businesses from that. Sourdough has been a big one in the last number of years since lockdown, so food will go through trends. And look, all I do is give the experience that I've had, and I suppose I've been very lucky in how am I a new product development chef, and rather than just a chef as such. I worked for the Kerry Group, who are globally massive, like in terms of ingredients and product development, and that really embedded a big lot of harsh knowledge into me in what new product development is as a chef.
Yeah, well, Kerry Group they're like huge. Like what they do, it's insane. It's like for the Irish economy, it's crazy. They're so big.
They're massive, and I mean they started as a co-op,
mad,
which is very interesting. And I can't remember. I remember seeing a statistic a number of years ago. I think that a quarter of everything we eat has come through Kerry Group in some capacity, in terms of their ingredient business, right through to their finished product and so on.
Yeah, it just goes to show you it's possible, in the food industry in Ireland.
Everything's possible, Ryan. What you want to achieve in life is possible, and even in looking at my career, sometimes you have to sit and coach yourself in a way to go, what do I want to do this year? What do I want to achieve? And it's okay to have like an ambition and a bit of a fantasy attached to it, because when you set that out subconsciously, you will probably always deliver upon it. And you quietly go about that navigation in your own mind, in your own conversation. And every Christmas I'll take stock, and I'll reset and I'll remind myself, mindfulness is a big part of my day, every day. Been doing it.
How would you describe, mindfulness?
To me, it is just settling myself, and it's calmness, and it's my own space, and it's done through my technique, which is the breathing. And I've been doing it probably 14 or 15 years, when you wouldn't have talked about it back then because it wasn't that cool, was it? What are you on about?
Still, it's only coming in now,
Yeah, a wee bit. But it's taking that moment in the day to reset, and I'm lucky enough. I get to do a lot of public work and emceeing and food festivals, and you're presenting then. So you can't just walk on stage times and interview people. You have to be prepared. You have to be ready for it, but you also have to decide that you need to remain yourself and consistent to yourself, because particularly in the chef's world, we see it all in terms of who's coming on stage, and they've all got different energy, and they've all got a different vibe coming with them, and I have to remind myself that my role is to convey what the chefs are saying, what the chefs are doing to the audience, to keep the audience connected to it, and that is live presenting in the middle of a field, a marquee, or, whether it's in the RDS, which we do a couple of times a year for the Ideal Home Show. And you're not just, it's if Nevin Maguire's coming on, or maybe it's Donald Skehan, or it could be Paul Costello as a designer, you're switching to interviewing them. So the mindfulness plays a role there, and that's the point that I'm making. And, I'll find a quiet space. I've done it in the middle of the field in the Kilmany Agriculture Show, where you just take a few minutes and it is just a little bit of breathing. And to me, it's just a reset for what I want from myself to perform for what the task is next.
When you are presenting, like, what do you feel you're representing?
Well, I'll always stay consistent to myself, and I'll try and always say that, because it doesn't matter to me whether I'm doing a demonstration, talking to you here today on a podcast. I should stay true to myself, because true is the authentic journey that I'm on, and I can relate my experience to it. But the role changes as particularly if you're emceeing, because, I could be emceeing a tourism event for Donegal Tourism, and who's the audience? I have to always think to myself, who is the audience, and what are they likely to want from this event, this session, or this conversation? And it's the same as going on to radio and live radio. What is the subject today? What am I there to talk about? And how many tips can I get out there that become memorable for the listeners, that they go, God, that's really good. I never thought of that. When it comes to cooking. And again, if it's back to the MC role as food festivals, then I need to get as much of that out of each of those chefs. And I suppose there's a comfort zone for the chefs when you're emceeing, because you are a chef and I am a chef as well. So there's that, they know, I could be looking at them and asking a question that they know, they're going, Brian, you know the answer to that. But it's not for me, I'm asking. Mm-hmm. So you have to present yourself in that way that you're asking, to get it to the audience, to get it out there and get as much information out of that 25-minute demonstration. And also to be kind to the chef who is there, out of their comfort zone, don't do maybe that many demonstrations, some do, to tell their story, their journey. Maybe it's their restaurant. So what is the landing space for them that you want to convey to the audience as well? And I just think, be prepared. It's, any meeting I go into, I try to think to myself, what's this meeting about, and what is the end result that we want from this? And, if you think I didn't think that driving over here today, then yes, and what do I want from today? It's to have a chat and be myself, and remind myself that I'm back. I'm back in my own parish. Yeah. This is where it started, and look at the subconscious of what's come out of me today as a result of that. It's us talking about being right back here in where we grew up, and where we were born, and where we're from.
Yeah. We kind of spoke about that before the cameras rolled, and I was saying to you too, it's just like, I'm wearing shorts and I'm just wearing what I typically wear, but there's another part of me like, oh, maybe I should dress up a wee bit because it's on camera, but then it's just like, but nah, this is just what I typically wear on a daily basis at home. I wouldn't wear my shoes now, so it's just like, just trying to be myself,
Yeah.
But then there's also that wee part like, oh, I need to show up, show up a wee bit more. But then I'm like, no, but this is me being authentic. This is me showing up,
Yeah, no, only you can decide that, Ryan. Like, I can't tell you what you're going to wear on your own show. I mean, what I said to you when I came in, I said, hey, Bert, GA shorts. And you go, aye. And then we were talking about the phenomenon that is GA shorts and O'Neill's. And then for some mad reason, you said, you know what I really want? Pockets in my GA shorts. And I said, Ryan, can you imagine pockets and GA shorts and you left half back for Bert with your hands in your pocket? Like,
oh, it'd be funny, wouldn't it?
Yeah, so I don't think you're going to get that one.
You wouldn't be on the pitch long.
No, definitely not.
But showing up authentically, I suppose it can be. I'd be nervous too coming on. Do you know what I mean? Like,
you should be. Yeah, you should be. And I think it was Dahi O'Shea gave me that advice years ago. Like, if you don't have the nerves, well, whatever you're going to do, whether once a microphone goes in front of you, isn't it weird until you get used to it? It's like,
it is.
What's going on? And thankfully, I've been lucky enough, like in the media, to get used to it now, and I still be nervous. So, and I'll always remember what Dahi said, like, and that is, if you're not nervous, then you're probably not enjoying it anymore. So, natural to have those nerves and make sure they're still there. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Just because I was like, well, hopefully I get used to it. Do you know what I mean? But I'm like, fucking hell. Yeah. I'm like feeling nervous again, Yeah. But anyways, not so it's going good. Something I want to talk to you too is about organic food. Where does organic food play a role?
I can answer that a number of ways, okay? I think you as a customer, and the fact you've asked me about it, there's something inquisitive in your mind as to, should I be eating organic? Should I not? And it's back to the whole perceptional thing and marketeering, I have this thing, I think it was in my first book, where I said, they said, but who are they? And sometimes even, I think if I come off a radio interview and I've said something, people might not remember my name because they were driving, but they might say, oh, they said on radio that you shouldn't do this now and you shouldn't do that. So there's a lot of marketeering that has a lot of influence in. And I need to be very careful with this answer because it's not directly related to organic, but it's no different to the veganism and that movement and that trend. What is it in reality? And everyone is entitled to make a decision as to what model they're going to subscribe to that is either on trend, off trend, is coming back, or they heard about. And very much entitled to that for their own reasons. And everybody's got a different reason. Organic food, I would say, I'm not going to say it's peaked, but I don't think it's continuing to get the traction and growth that it's set out to achieve and probably deserves in a lot of ways. And a snapshot of that is to look within a supermarket to see how much space is given to organic versus conventional foods or otherwise. And if it was working at a rapid pace, then there would be a lot more space. But don't forget, for someone to turn their farm into organic, that's not overnight. That can be 5+ years as a process, and in the interim period, not much income coming out of them farms in that period of time. So that transition is very difficult, costly, and arguably risky for an awful lot of people, from veg growing right through to full dairy and milk and all of that. So I don't know where it's going to go. It's certainly here to stay, of course it is. I'm delighted that it is in many, many ways, but it's like the organic salmon. I find that weird.
Yeah.
Answer that one. Think about it for a second, fish and, where salmon has gone and come from, and the days of it being wild versus now being organic, and still tells me in that statement, well, they are controlling the feed, which tells me they're controlling where the salmon is and all of that, which is the answer. But it's one that I often thought, God, why have they applied organic to the salmon, where to me initially, I suppose incorrectly, my thought process was it was organic associated with growing and the soil and all of that to produce organic food that ultimately is going to be a little bit slower growing. But I mean, organic's not our challenge anymore. It's foods and proteins that are getting produced and factory made, and a lot of science involved. And we're hearing that there will be a protein shortage, particularly of certain varieties of protein and meats and so on. So there's all sorts of development and wildness going on in relation to what you and I could be eating as a protein, and maybe crickets, going into flour and that becoming part of our protein. That's all happening. It's all out there. But again, you'll go down a rabbit hole if you look at the research around it. And for now, it certainly isn't as evident in your shopping basket on a weekly basis.
Yeah, well, the way I look at it, first of all, it is expensive. It's because the way that the food is being produced, there's more resources required, and that adds obviously an added cost. But another factor that I look at is, I look at like the soil as a living species. So like putting chemicals into the soil to enhance the ground. So I look at that as like, Mother Earth, she's a living being. So I'm always conscious of that. Just because I feel like I have this real connection with nature. We all do, but I just, I look at it. Now, I'm not saying that I eat all organic, because I don't, because it's just not convenient yet. I can't just go out and buy organic, But also, like, if you go back 100 years, I assume everything was just natural. No,
it was. Yeah.
So like, it's still possible. If you look at it like that, no,
it's possible, but you'll never have. I don't think you'll have any more than 25-30% of your basket and your weekly shopping that's going to be organic. And I think that would be very challenging to go over above and beyond that. And a lot of people say I only eat organic, but that's not the true answer. They only eat organic in their big mentions of, they might went that way with chicken, they might have went that way with beef, with the vegetables. But there's an awful lot of the other ingredients that is very, very difficult to get
Yeah.
and make organic for the reasons that you and I are talking about. And again, they are a bit more expensive because the process of the slowness and the production and the methods and all of that. But yeah, look, years ago, absolutely. I mean, it was from the soil. And you raise an interesting point, because I think Ireland, as an island, the best product we have is what comes from the soil, the grass, and our dairy industry. I think our meat is phenomenal, our beef in particular. And then the other products from that, in the milk, whole milk, and even, Ryan, around, the Greening Estate was one of the biggest farms in Ireland for a long period of time. So we lived upon it every day, looking at it, walking through it, being part of it. And then it's only maybe about 20 years ago when, there's milk coming off this land again that is higher in protein, higher in fat than some of the other parts of Ireland. And again, that flatness, that rainfall. So the quality of product that comes from the land that grounds us in many, many ways is exquisite. And the cheese that we get as a result, the buttermilks, all of what had gone before us and we grew up with, from our parents and grandparents, then those are the ingredients I love, because that, not just is it that memory and that link, but I think there's a bit of reconnection there to be done. And only a couple of days ago I was making brown bread again, and it's the buttermilk and it's from Donegal, and you're kind of thinking to yourself, God, there's something nice about what we're doing here. And really, the smells, the whole sensory around that, and the whole feel, of making bread and feeling it again and getting it into the oven, and the smell in the house, and anybody coming in, it's conversation for the day. And it really takes about 10 minutes to bring together, a traditional wheaten loaf. It's not that much work for an awful lot of brilliant results. And I think they're reminders of that kind of generational change that has naturally happened as all of us push on in life. But again, it's that reconnection back to, my mother used to do that, so it must be right. Because, I trust her. And,
Yeah.
and again, the buttermilk in that is just a key influential ingredient. And then, of course, we let it cool, we slice it, and what do we add to it? Butter. Mm-hmm. And Irish butter is amazing.
Do you know what? I never really eat butter, but recently I've just started eating. I might have an odd slice of toaster, put it on my toast if I'm having eggs, whatever. But it's so nice, like Kerrygold.
But we've all, we're back now saying, God, why is butter so expensive? But you could say they again, because they said there for about 20 years that butter wasn't good for you. You remember that? Mm-hmm. Now, us as chefs, we never said that, because we and I have always loved the flavour of butter. So we started going to all these spreads and margarines, and that was damn good marketeering that created a perception very quickly that influenced you and I as consumers to go, do you know what? The block of butter isn't on the table anymore, but it's back. And guess what? We're having to pay more for it. And the reason is because, where did that butter go during that period of time when we weren't buying it? It went to Germany, to France, and they saw how good the Irish butter was. So the fact we're back in love and wanting it, do you think they're going to stop those markets? No. So they're having to produce and more, and butter's getting expensive. And it's kind of our own fault in some ways. We turned our back on it.
Yeah. Yeah, I have to say I'm falling in love with it again. Aren't I?
Yeah, the butter dish back on the table, is it? Ours is.
It is.
Yeah.
No, we've always had butter, to be fair, in this house. Always have butter. But I suppose I was conscious of it because probably what you said is this, like, butter's fat, and I know I don't want to be eating fat, but now I'm like, well, it's kind of good fat, like.
Yeah,
so
it is
I'm
good
like,
fat.
yeah, so
I remember doing cookery classes, Ryan, a number of years ago, and I remember a bread recipe that I had I didn't put any butter into it, because this lady had said to me, "Oh, can you make it without butter?" And I thought, "Yeah, I will. I'll adapt and I'll change it." So I put in some oil, local rapeseed oil. Now the bread was fine, but it was certainly to me missing a little bit of the flavour. But we did it in the cookery class and we cooled it, and I just took a glance down, and there was maybe 12 people there. What were they all putting onto the bread that had no butter in it? Butter. So they wanted healthier bread that had no butter in it. But the minute then it cools and sliced, it went to, you have to put a slab of butter back onto that bread. And yeah, it was just one of the moments I took stock and I went, that's very interesting. And again, it is that perceptual thing of when it comes to food, that's a really good healthy bread, but we still want a bit of butter on it. And it is good fat, you're right, and beautiful flavour.
Good. Another thing I have to question you about is there much challenges today, like in running a business, like a food business? So I seem to hear that there is, challenges with chefs, etc. It's challenging.
If in relation to food businesses, you mean hospitality
Yeah,
and
like a
catering?
restaurant.
Yeah, it's. I mean, I'm nearly 30 years a chef, and I've been in that business. It's the toughest I have ever seen it. And speaking, to a lot of my friends in the industry, I've never seen it as tight in terms of margins at the moment. Food costs with where they are, and the creativity, the work, and the labor that has to go into it to create recipes, to create menus, to provide safe food for you when you eat out in a restaurant, to give you an experience from the ambience to the lighting to the trained staff. I mean, everybody right now as consumers, we're nearly making our decision before we go in there because, God, we heard that place is doing well now. We heard that's good. There's only two types of customers, new and repeat. The perception and the marketing and the word of mouth will get you the new, but the product, service and tasting will get you the repeat. You'll go back there. And it's very, very hard from the start of that food coming in, that sourcing, buying the best, giving the farmer, giving the producer what they deserve for it, and adding that whole value the whole way through, getting the labour that's required, not just in the cooking, but in the serving of it, and put out a plate of food that arguably now, is doubled in price in the last certainly 3 to 4 years. But the industry is in a very, very tough place right now, and margins are very, very tight and low.
Because the reason I'm curious too, I did mention it to you, is I converted a shipping container into a food truck. I started it 2 years ago. It's ready a year and a half. I never proceeded because, number one, it's not a priority for me. Number two, I don't have the interest or the time to actually run that business, to convert it, or it's already converted, but to do and to manage it all. Now I did put it out there on social media a few days ago. See, I've had a good few responses of people who are interested in doing it, but I've also heard people say, you're going to have problems, you're going to have challenges with chefs. That's going to be your biggest challenge. The food that I want to do is pizza and tacos and burritos, which is just my favorite takeaway food. I love pizzas and I love tacos and burritos, but my thinking also behind it is that it's not like food is food, so it's important that it's delivered high quality. That's really important to me. I would love to do organic local produce as best I can, but also it needs to be feasible. It needs to work. So it costs. I don't know if that's possible. So we'll see. But anyways, I'm being met with these conversations of you're going to have problems with chef and stuff. So what's your thoughts?
Firstly, on chefs, it's known out there there's a shortage of chefs and so on. But I think that's easing a little bit. Unfortunately, there's not an awful lot of people wanting to get into the industry right now. And I would encourage anybody who's thinking of a career change, or anybody that has children coming up. It's an unbelievable career with a lot of satisfaction and a lot of creativity that can keep on giving. And there's so much learning to be done. You can take this wherever you want as a role, as a chef, and internationally you can go wherever you want. Everything that you learn and pick up is so transferable. And I would encourage people to get into the industry because conditions have got an awful lot better. We see restaurants now only since COVID operating 4 day a week, giving the chefs a 4 day a week. So things are changing for the better. Staff retention has started to settle and got a little bit better, particularly with a lot of hospitality businesses at the minute. So I don't think that chef shortage is as bad as it certainly was a number of years ago. Leaving that aside for a second and going to you and going to what it is you want and what your model is, and I know I'm questioning you here live, but I don't know. Are you trying to create or lease this? What I would say to you is street food's very, very popular at the moment, and if you were and could create a model that did not require chefs and had semi-skilled individuals and people who were just passionately part of this, then you're going to develop a model then that isn't as reliant on that high-skilled chef that you're thinking you might need. Where in some cases a chef may not fully need to be the answer, depending on that style of food and that model. Because we have seen, again, as I think since 2019, we've seen, not just the coffee vans that are on the side of the road absolutely everywhere. That's kind of moving on now, and I think that's subsiding a little bit, and we're seeing a little bit more of what you're trying to do, the street food being accessible and being available and being an experience for all of us. And if you can deliver that, you know, from a mobile converted trailer at the, you know, the side of the road in Bridgend or Burnfoot, you know, you could well get a really good audience very, very fast for that. I feel, and the type of food you're talking about is certainly on trend. Pizza's never gone away. People have always loved pizza, and when they get a good pizza, they'll continue to return to it. So I suppose for you, it's like, what makes a good pizza? Can I make the best? Push yourself to elevate every element of what you're going to do, from the ingredient, from the sauce to the cheese. And if you can link that to local where it's available, if you can link it to organic where it's available, because that's what you set out at the start of this conversation to achieve, then again, that's you exploring that. That's you developing that model on paper, and it's you getting what's in here out there. So there is an understanding, and then you'll know what skills you need to deliver that, in terms of if it's a chef, if it's a semi-skilled person, you know then what you're recruiting to deliver the model and on to the burritos and so on after that.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what you said there. You've hit the nail on the head. It's like, I don't feel like I need a really high skilled chef, because the food is not being delivered dish by dish. It's like you are batch cooking food, you know, you preparing it, and it probably only needs prepared twice a day. You know, you cook it in the morning and then maybe in the afternoon, depending on how busy you are or whatever. So in my own head, I'm like, well, it's not like hugely intensive in terms of that. There's time involved, but then you do need someone to make sure that the quality is being delivered, because that's really important for me, you know. So that's why I'm like a little bit hesitant, and I may never do it if I don't feel that the right person comes and, you know, I feel like we can do it. But I want to create a vibe, and again, look, to be honest, I want something that I can eat at the weekend myself, you know. But also I do want to kind of create a bit of an experience where it is street food and a bit of a vibe. You can come down and chill out, and you know. So
and there's people doing that very well. I mean, Pikes and Palms doing it very well up in Derry.
They do, yeah.
Kevin has done that. One of the first really to appear in the Northwest and to do that, and has made it his own, has owned that, and you know, there is a vibe, there's a community there around that, and you can create that, absolutely. But you know, again, it's as a business piece versus the hobby. You're gonna have to explore that and find out and see where you are on that journey, because what I'm hearing today is you don't have a lot of time. And this is going to need time as well to get this off the ground. So you're going to have to prioritize where and how you do this.
Yeah, and that's why I know it's not an employee I'm looking for. It's someone who wants to run a business. You know, that can go in and I can help as well. Because I know what I want. I know the vision that I have. It's just someone integrating that. You know. So
yeah. Well, look, you just don't know who's out there and looking for a change at the minute, and you know, it could be a chef looking to get out of the industry, and maybe wants that lifestyle as well, because there's something given back when you do kind of that street food and that kind of lesser finesse of plated food, and it just becomes all about the flavor. It's slow cooking. It's almost soul food is really what you're trying to deliver, and every time that's eaten, there has to be a real feel good factor of that was the best burrito I ever got.
Yes. We'll see.
Time will tell.
There might be a guy lives in Moville that I know, you know. I want to talk about Donegal, you know, because I think you represent, well, I know that you represent Donegal on an international stage, which is this book, Donegal Table.
Well, Donegal is important to all of us, I think, and it's very important to me in everything that I did, because none of us owns Donegal. We're part of it, and we are the people of Donegal. And I actually honestly feel that it's our time here in Donegal, and I've thought that now for 4 or 5 years. And what I mean by that is that, you know, people say we're cute, we're modest, we're quiet. We are by nature up here in Donegal, so that presents a challenge when it comes to shouting about our tourism, shouting about Green in Avalliach and how beautiful it is, and the Inch Walk and the Moville Shore Walk. All of those things are important to let people know that they're here, they're on our doorstep, and just because they're here and local to us and ours doesn't mean that we can't be proud of them as equally as we're proud of part of Donegal. So I think we all have a voice to continue to connect that back up into an overall tourism piece, and I honestly believe that Donegal Tourism, I think they're doing an amazing job. I really do. I think they've come on leaps and bounds in the last number of years to promote the county and to lean on people that have voices, and you know, we were lucky, like if it's Daniel O'Donnell, I mean, that man, what he's done for Donegal, there's numerous people that I could mention. So when I get to connect and I get to do my piece on a platform, I'll always do it. And I'm proud to be from Donegal. It's like someone says to me, how do you know someone's from Donegal? They're going to tell you very quick, very quick, because we're proud, and it's a county that people warm to, I think. I certainly see that on my travels at food festivals. So it's funny when it came to doing this. This was my third cookery book, and when it came to doing that book, I just, two things I wanted was, first of all, Donegal, and then a sense of the table. And we've talked about it today, but my memories, of the kitchen table and me growing up and being told to get up, the last spoonful of stew went into me because there was another, 6 family members coming to that table to sit, and it was like, get up, you're in the older 6, so you're out, and they're back in. So Donegal Table seemed the right title for a book for me to share my experience growing up as a chef, the reconnection with some of the food that I ate, and also, my experience now of bringing recipes together and giving people a visual and giving them not just those stories and those recipes, but just a real proud sense of place for Donegal. But it's quite interesting because that, to a book publisher, is probably didn't land particularly well going Donegal Table, when you're in a meeting in Dublin. Because it's like, oh...
Did you have questions around that?
Well, I wouldn't say questions. I think they're entitled to sort of say, is this the right title and the right fit for the book? But once I kicked into gear and passion about Donegal, and this is where I'm from, and what I've just told you is the story, it was like, okay, yeah.
We hear you.
Yeah, we hear you. And so we went with the title because it was, the case would it be more isolating to just a Donegal audience? And it wasn't, and it hasn't been... and I think we've done somewhere in the region of 12,000 copies of it has sold, which is amazing for O'Brien Press and the publishers, and obviously has a knock-on effect for me as well.
So it's an Irish bestseller.
Yeah.
And you won a worldwide award.
Yeah, we did. And that was lovely because, you set out to do a book and you don't know where it's going to go at a time. You're always questioning, is books still valid? Are people buying books because they're scrolling? They're looking at videos, they're looking at recipes, but cookery books are still performing very well. And the whole Cookery Book Award thing for me was amazing because it's something you don't enter. It's something it's picked up out there. And I got a letter from the Gourmand World Book Awards in France saying, "Oh, you've been shortlisted as a finalist in China. It was in 3 months' time." And I'm sort of going, what is this about? And you're kind of, with so many scams going on, you're sort of going, what is this? And no, I don't have to pay. So I obviously looked into it then with the publishers, and they're like, no, this is amazing, Brian, this is brilliant. And we went to China, Brenda and I went to China, and I just thought this is a great chance to, be a finalist, and didn't really say much about it. I just said, we'll go off and see what's happening. And it was a 3-day event, and then when I arrived and I seen I seen global chefs from all over the world, and I'm going, Jesus, yeah, they're all here. And then when the category came, and up it came I think there was 6 of us as finalists, and then they just announced it as the world's best cookery book written by a chef, and up came on the screen Donegal Table, and I don't even remember them saying my name, and. It was just one of them moments where you went, what the hell is going on here?
What did that feel like in that moment?
At that moment, because I genuinely did not expect it, wasn't aware, was glad to be in China to experience that, to sit there. And I just remember my heart rate going, Jesus, am I going to be okay here? And then, had to make a speech, and I couldn't tell you what I said, but I just remember connecting it back to, again, how important Donegal was for me, and still is. And then just the aftermath of it then, because it had gone into the media and RT and stuff, and it was just interviews for the next 2 days then, where you were kind of on radio and doing an awful lot of the follow-up, and then came home to a lovely reception at home for it as well. It was amazing.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting because you wrote a book just about, you didn't write it with the intention of an award, but I suppose you wrote it with a lot of passion. Coming from Donegal,
I came home,
representing.
Ryan. I came home from China, and I forgot to ask, well, why is it won? So I did, me being me then, I waited a number of weeks, and I was like, do you mind me asking, why is one in the scoring? And exactly what you've just said, they just said they felt it was very authentic, and it was somebody that was proud to be from that place, that was Donegal. and brought stories through the recipes of childhood right through to very practical recipes that people could relate to from the region. And to me, I didn't set out to do that, but it was a lovely way when they put it to go, well, maybe I actually did want that to be how the book was going to be. And yeah, you don't write a book to think, you know, you're ever going to get an award for it, and let alone one, you know, on that global stage. And that, it wasn't an award for me. For me, it was for Donegal, you know, and it was for my family, and it was for the girls who were a big part of it, Neve and Aoife and Brenda, my wife. So yeah, look, it's one of those ones you'll look back on and you'll kind of go, that was just a lovely moment. And you have to enjoy those moments. Like, you're not being cocky by just saying, you know, that's a nice moment to get recognition for your county. And it still continues, you know, and I hope it does, to kind of bring a bit more focus to Donegal when people see that in bookshops and so on. It's that proud word again, isn't it, Donegal?
Yeah, no, it's amazing. Like, it really is. Donegal seems to be winning a few things in the last few years too, you know, for its beauty, natural beauty. So it's amazing to see someone like yourself in the food scene doing it with food, you know.
Yeah, and if you look kind of in the back of the book, Ryan, I
read
crucial
a line
that I wanted.
Bring a taste of Donegal to your table.
Yeah, but I was key that I wanted Green na Bhaillic Fort on the back of that book, because that's where I grew up.
Yes.
You know, and I cycled up there, and, you know, we were in the middle of that. That's where our summers, and, you know, you've touched upon it there now. Like, I think it's only in the last 8 to 10 years that Greenan is getting the recognition that it deserves now as its viewing point and its history. You know, when you stand there and you can see, you know, Inch Island, and you can see Burt, and you can see Bridgend and Burnfoot and Derry, and as far away as some people believe Scotland. I've never actually seen it. Some people say, oh, you can see Scotland from Greenland. I'm like, I've been up there many's a day, and I'm not so sure I can see that far. But you know, to touch the counties that it can see, and also you know, the whole St. Patrick's connection to it, and the history that it played. Yet that seemed to be our round football and hurling field, like for the summers many's a time.
It's funny because, like, everyone knows St. Patrick, you know, when I get asked, people from abroad, St. Patrick's, I'm like, well, I can see a fort, you know, right from where I live, you know, which is pretty special up there. Yeah,
it is. They're again, like, you go up there, and I take my girls, I drag them up there, like, a lot of the time, because, you know, I always say to them, you know, use your half from Bridgend and Burt, not just Moville. And it's a bit of humour in our house, but they love going up there, and they hear the same stories from me every time, because I can see them behind me looking, kind of going, here he goes again, like, you know, the same story from 30 years ago.
Brian, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today. Really enjoyed it. Thank you so much for sharing your insight into food, and also sharing your details on how I can cook better for a longer, healthier life too.
Yeah,
appreciate that.
And I hope you do, Ryan. And look, it's a pleasure. As I said, I came on here with coming back to a sense of place of where I'm from, and to talk about the stories. And it's rekindled an awful lot of, you know, my childhood, my growing up, my family, the school, the stories, good, bad, and indifferent. And, you know, in some ways, if you and the listeners can take away that, just to be a bit more mindful and really to invest in your health. And the best way you can invest in your health is through your food, and get cooking in there. Just get it in as one more dish this week, and that might become 2 dishes next week in home cooked food, and slightly stay away from the ultra processed, and go back to what we remember and what we know is good, which again was set out by our parents and people before us. And it's that just sense of grounding yourself through food, and it will pay dividends. You'll have a happier, healthier lifestyle. So thank you, Ryan.
Thank you very much, Brian. Absolute pleasure. Thank you.